Beautiful California, and as Dr. Day indicated, we were fortunate enough to make a family trip out of it. And my wife and my two boys are in the back center column, and you'll see a few pictures of them throughout my presentation. And this first picture is a picture of Ethan and I playing basketball. And I think a lot of the significance to bracing is to just truly allow you to do the stuff that you want to do throughout your life. And I'm going to keep coming back to that over and over again. I certainly see bracing as, as a tool, as something to allow us to do everything that we would like to be able to do. So I start the presentation with us. We flew into Las Vegas, and we were lucky enough to go and visit some friends that we hadn't seen in 12 years, and we started this down in San Diego. And so there's Elizabeth and my two boys. Some of the wonderful features of doing a trip is you get to explore a lot of different sites, and California is certainly a beautiful state to be able to do so. And what's, I think, fantastic to see is that both Ethan and I wear bracing. And there is so much that we wouldn't be able to do without this bracing. And, again, it is to be able to explore, to be able to walk the beach, to be able to climb the rocks, and to be able to bike. These are just everyday things that, with CMT, you sort of lose some of the abilities, and you have to shift some of your abilities. So that is always what my life goal has been, is to not let the CMT sort of take charge of me, and for me to really take charge of what I want to do in life. And so to come back a little bit, so CMT, I have CMT 1B. It's very prevalent in my family. We probably have over 15 members with this CMT, and we seem to be an island all on our own. So we have CMT 1B, and as you may know, there's like over 80 or 85 different types of CMT, and that number is just growing and growing and growing. As we learn more about genetics and can isolate where the problem is on your chromosome, you get these small islands or these pockets of families that just pass this disease down the line. So part of my agenda is to really talk about the generalized concerns of complaints of people with CMT. And I've been practicing in orthotics and prosthetics for certainly over 20 years. And what's helpful for me when I'm talking with my patients, and hopefully when I'm talking to you guys today, is to get you to really understand what's going on with your body, to understand what the bracing needs to do and is trying to do. And if you guys can start to really understand it, then you can either help yourself or help friends or family, and maybe push them to do maybe a little bit more bracing if they're not doing everything that you think that they want to do. And what I find is very common amongst individuals with CMT is we're all very proud individuals, and this condition sort of just creeps its way into our lives with almost not knowing that you're starting to shift your behavior a little bit. And and then you sort of don't do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you then start to wish, well, maybe I should be doing that. Well, maybe I can't do that. And that's what we want to change. And that's what I feel I've done for my life. It's been an interesting career for me because, I didn't wear bracing until I was 40. And I've been 40 many times, many years. And but all the way up to that point, I was always using inserts. I had a natural sense that I want it to be aligned correctly. And I don't know or understand where that came from. It just wasn't comfortable for me to roll out on the outside of my foot. So I always wore inserts. And I think that is one of the critical things that I want us all to learn, is to start bracing early. And a simple shoe or a simple insert is a type of brace. And the better our alignment can be from the beginning makes maybe if you need bracing as ankle foot orthoses or something a little bit more aggressive down the line, it makes that easier. And because you haven't lost range of motion, the positioning of the foot is just in a better position. So what I'd love to also do is try to, if anyone has a question and you'd like to stop, and I'd love you to do so. We have about 40 minutes, so there's lots of time. I have put some questions and some answers at the end of my presentation that seem to be common questions. But I would love, if you have a question, to just stop me and ask it, because I'm sure if you have the thought, a lot of others have the thought as well. So what are the main complaints that individuals with CMT have? So a lot of it is foot and ankle weakness. So you get this drop foot or a foot slap. You can hear yourself walking on the floor, such as what we have here. But then often there's the push off is fairly weak. So when we walk, we have heel strike, foot flat, and push off. So it's that push off that really pushes us forward. An unsteady gait, like a poor balance. So typically when you see me walking, it's not just a normal straight pathway, I meander. And so I think we all end up being meanders with CMT. Decreased proprioception. So this is actually really key to CMT. So those nerves not only run the muscles, but they also run information back and forth on where you are in space. So you'll find what we'll do as tricks is maybe we'll walk with a cane that just gives feedback to our hand. Maybe we'll just grab furniture or grab a wall, and that's changing the point of contact to know where we are in space. A lot of us use our eyesight to sort of help with that balance. My wife loves this trick when she's mad at me, and at night she'll turn the lights out in the bedroom, and it doesn't take long for her to hear this thud on the ground. And so I hope I've not given too many others tricks of the trade, but it is entertaining because that eyesight just helps so much with just knowing where you are in space. Complaints are atrophy of the muscles and claw toes. A lot of us use the incorrect terminology of hammer toes. Even the medical community use the incorrect terminology of hammer toes. Typically, we have claw toes, which is flexion at the two joints on the toes. A hammer toe is just a flexion of the distal tip. So it's claw toes that we have. Callousing. I'd really like to think that none of us should have calluses, and I don't have calluses, and you don't need to have calluses, but calluses develop when you're getting forces typically on a bony landmark that really shouldn't be there. So if there is a callus there, then you really should try to address that and figure out, well, why is that there? And that's typically where you need to go to see an orthotist or someone who you trust to build your devices, whether it's an insert or an AFO or whatever it might be. But callousing can be very painful, and it's your body's over-response to pressure. So numbness in the hands and the feet. So that is certainly quite common for all of us as well. And a lot of us don't, we focus so much on the feet, but the hands are also quite critical as well. There's probably less bracing that is done for the hands. A lot of it is more maintaining range of motion, or if you've developed an injury to try to stabilize a joint. I developed a huge amount of atrophy in my hands and completely lost the ability to oppose my thumb. And I had an amazing surgery that just rerouted some tendons to allow me to do the hobbies and the work that I do. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning that I've always been a hobbyist. I'm the guy who took apart the radio and was able to put it back together again, and paint up my bike and all of these things. And this has just been, I think, an amazing career for me because I just had that ability to be able to build things and to sort of make sense out of things. But as my disease progressed, I just substituted tools. And it's incredible what tools can do when you're a woodworker or whatever you might do. And that's how I really look at bracing. Bracing is, again, I always come back to this. It's just, it's a tool to help you in your life. So why a high arch? CMT for most, it creates a high arch. There's certainly, that's not exclusive, but it probably represents 90% of individuals. And that's likely just a number that I pulled out of my head from what I see in my practice. More people are going to have the mechanics to push them into that supinatory position. So this develops because of the imbalance of the muscles. So I've always tried to come up with an analogy that sort of can make sense to people. Well, why is my arch going high? And something I've sort of thought about that makes sense is if you can imagine a door, pivoting on its hinge, and you have two strings or a rope pulling from that door. If you pull on one of those strings, it can pull the door closed. If you pull on the other one, it can open the door. Well, that's all our muscles are doing around all of the joints in our foot and ankles, is it's just pulling one way or the other. And what happens is the sequence, it's the further the nerve has to travel, the more information that needs to go back and forth so often. So it's those furthest muscles that weaken first. And so it's the imbalance of the muscles that causes the shape of the foot. And one of the more critical positions, so you can really see in this picture here on the right foot, you can sort of see the way that heel is tilted inwards, and the forefoot it's called adducted, so it's off of midline towards the inside, and that whole extremity is externally rotating at the hip. And that causes a lot of these forces at the foot and ankle. Now, if some of you out there have a very flat foot, you can almost imagine these forces happening in the exact opposite way. So I'm talking today largely about a high arch because that affects us mostly. But if you are one of those lucky individuals that's more of a pronator, then you just sort of reverse everything, so everything can internally rotate. And so when we look at bracing, we're just looking to counteract the forces that exist. I love this picture because this really drives home the position of the heel. So you can see on the far right, you can see that line that goes down the midline of the calf and down the heel. You can see how there's an angle there. Well, that angle is created because of that big toe. So in that center drawing, you can see that big toe. Well, that's called the first ray. So it's the ball of your foot, the first metatarsal. The muscle is so strong and so hard that it pulls that first ray downward. And that's what creates a lot of these external rotary forces. So the foot itself, you can see how the hind foot is completely neutral in that position when the ball is hitting the ground. The problem is when you stand on that foot, the forefoot has to completely get on the ground, and when it does so, it rotates and it creates that inverted heel. So when you're thinking about your insert, if we could just fill that space underneath the fifth metatarsal, that's the space that we need to fill to hold this foot much more neutral. So normal human locomotion travels through a 2-inch corridor. So if you can imagine a dot on your pelvis, that dot in normal human locomotion moves back and forth 1 inch, so 2 inches total, and up and down 1 inch, 2 inches total. So that 2-inch box is efficient normal human locomotion. With CMT, probably 6 inches, maybe 8 inches. Me a few times 2 feet. But so this is when we're thinking about bracing and we're thinking about efficiency and getting you guys back to what you want to do, we're thinking about how do we bring stuff back to normal human locomotion? How do we stabilize your body? Yes? That is a foot, and I should have described what that dot is moving back and forth. But so that's at heel strike is on the left side of the screen. So that's at heel strike. Normal human locomotion is heel strike. You land on the outside of your heel, and then you move towards the ball of your foot. But for us, or for many people with a high arch foot, they'll land on the outside of your foot, and you'll stay to the outside of your foot. And all of those forces, always to the outside of your foot, over time can create calluses. Over time can create your foot to twist in more and more. And over time can affect your knee, your hip, your back. So it just works its way up the chain. Thank you for that clarification. So this is commonly what we see. We see, a lot of people think that their bones are getting bigger, but what's in fact happening, or more often what's happening, is the muscles that run around the skeleton are actually getting smaller. So you see the bones a lot more. So that's the base of the fifth, and that's the head of the fifth, where that really large callus is. And that's very typical of CMT, someone spending too much time on the outside of your foot. So the forces that we're trying to do is to try to get the foot much more towards the inside. So heel strike, it's still going to occur on the lateral or the outside of the heel, but as you progress towards toe off, you want to try to get the body weight more medial. So these are just some typical pictures of the classic pes cavus. You can see from the side there, you see how that foot is just really twisting. And you can see also above the diagram, that foot is just all rolled outwards. So these are, there's times that the foot still has good range of motion that we want to put forces onto the body to try to hold this straight, to try to hold it so it doesn't stay like this. If we don't use something, we can lose it. So maintaining range of motion is one of the most important things all of us need to do. In a high arch foot, it becomes a very strong, rigid foot. And we'd like to maintain the range of motion. So we can try to direct the foot and try to get it back into a normal alignment. It's a great picture from behind. So, you as the individual are not going to see your heels too often, but your friends, your family can see your heels, and this is very common. So you can see that tilting that occurs. And then what happens, you can really see how the fibula is subluxing or is coming out of joint on that far picture. And that's simply because there's been just a lot of forces that slowly work the foot more and more. And our bodies move. If you think about braces on your teeth, you can move things over a little bit of force over a long period of time changes things. And what we don't want is to see this, because it's so much harder to brace. You might find, thinking about those pictures, you might find that you still can walk very well, and you can get around and do the stuff you want to do. But if you're out of alignment, it's harder to do it. So you'd be way better to be trying to get yourself much more centered, because, again, it'd be easier for you to do what you are wanting to do. So goals. What can we achieve? Well, our primary goal is to prevent the deformity. We want to support and align all the skeletal structures. We'd like to limit or enhance motion about specific joints. We want to be able to enhance your muscles. If your muscles are going to fatigue, we would far rather you'd be able to do more, or do this, again, the stuff that you'd like to be able to do. And we want to be able to improve your balance. So what does this really mean for you? What I think it does, it allows you to do activities you otherwise you couldn't do. Like, come on, mow the lawn, cleaning windows, the dishwasher, laundry. Isn't it great if we can all be able to do that? And fortunately, we can take off our braces, which would mean that we can't do any of those things. So, you have that choice. But we all have our own list on what we'd like to be able to do. And just to be able to do more throughout the day, I think that's pretty darn powerful. So, yes, sure can.
Hip dysplasia. Can you explain why that happens? Because it seems to be an issue with some people, especially older folks.
Yeah. So typically, if someone has this torque, and again, I'm going to always bring it to the.
Can you repeat the question?
Just concerns about the hip and hip dysplasia, so dislocations of the hip and the pain at the hip. The hip is certainly a joint that's a joint that you have to be careful about. There's a lot of people without CMT who have hip replacement surgeries. It's because ultimately we're humans. We're not originally designed to be on 2 feet. But when that alignment really changes, then you're going to end up torquing the muscles, and the joint, the hip itself is not going to be properly seated into the pelvis. So if you think back to some of those drawings and pictures that I had, if the whole extremity is externally rotated, then you have to think that that socket and ball are not aligned in the original way that it was created. So you get a lot of rubbing, you get a lot of arthritis at that joint. So balance. This is, I think, just such a key for us on a day-to-day basis. To be able to stand in a room and to be able to be solid on your feet, to be able to have a conversation and not have to hang on to something. I think that's pretty powerful, at least for me it is. And balance and walking, it is, walking truly is considered like a series of falls, but it's a controlled fall. For us, if we don't have all this feedback that I talked about, then a lot of this stuff doesn't happen as effectively as it should. I love these minions. The minions have helped me sort of just know that I'm not alone. And the first amazing minion cartoon character was in Elizabeth's presentation, and I was fortunate enough to go first today to get the minions up on stage first. So, but hers is actually way better than mine. So while I was searching for more that were better than hers, I was able to come across these two. So, obviously, there's a lot of humor that you sort of bring into the situation when you walk into a room and you trip, but it's nice that the support is there and that the floor will be there for you. So, humor, I think, just becomes such at least for me, has become, a part of the CMT lifestyle. But the serious side of falling is hurting yourself, and that's critical. So, it can be embarrassing, and obviously injury. So finally, we get to bracing. What design is right for you? And there's no real right or wrong answer, but some of the things that I think are critical that I hope we're learning is to get someone into the right alignment, to get you to be able to do the stuff that you're wanting to do. I'm going to keep coming back to that. I do consider bracing like a tool. I don't wear just one type of brace. I'm wearing a set of carbon AFOs today. I'm in a situation where I want to be more stable, but I do use those silicone braces that are in that blue diagram, and those are fantastic for around the home because you don't have to wear shoes. I definitely do have a complete flaccid foot, so I need something to stabilize my foot, and that's what that can do. I can use that around water. I do a lot of water sports, so walking around a pool. And, I wear a pair of Crocs, and those braces are, I still don't look pretty when I walk, but I'm a lot safer. So all of these devices, are very useful and used for CMT. So I start bringing in some additional pictures. We've got some carbon fiber bracing up in the corner here. We've got the foot orthoses. The foot orthoses you should consider as your starting point, because if you've got the strength around your ankles, let's just get your alignment correct and getting your alignment correct is just going to help you to use your muscles correctly. How do you know when to start this? You know, my feeling is you start early. You start now. You know, if you have been diagnosed with CMT in any way and you have a slightly high arch foot or a low arch foot, then you really should have an insert. You want to have your foot in a neutral alignment. So in the way the body was originally designed. And so the foot orthotics are the best way to start. And then you can start creeping it up the body, you know, getting a little bit larger. An SMO, I write here, an SMO is just a supramalleolar orthosis. So it just comes up and grabs your ankles a little bit, offers a little bit of stability side to side. And, you know, you don't have to go all the way up the legs. You know, this is a picture of Ethan years ago where he had plenty of strength. He didn't have drop foot or anything, but he had a very high arched foot. And his muscles were strong, so strong that I couldn't control his mechanics. So I had to start going up the leg to start to really put forces on his body stronger than what his body was creating for himself. So you can see at the top, that plantar flexed first ray we talked about, and that's the posting. So the posting is just filling that material, filling the space that's there to try to drive the foot, to try to get it up onto the ball of the foot. These pictures down below really show how someone came in with an insert that actually completely filled their arch. And some of the theories are, I perceive them as to be incorrect theories, is to bring the arch, the insert, all the way up to the arch of the foot. But that just has one effect, and that's to push you further out. So what you really need to be doing is posting the outside to drive that arch down, because that arch is too much, it's too supportive, the foot's too rigid. So if you can drive the foot down, you can start to get the foot to being a little bit more flexible. I briefly talked about SMOs. So these devices, a little bit stronger plastics, they can impart a little bit more force onto the body and start straightening out the foot a little bit more. You know, these are ideal for younger children. I certainly use them for adults as well. I use a little bit more flexible plastics with adults, just because their skin can't handle the pressures as well as younger individuals. A question? An SMO? We call all of these devices by the joints that they cover. So an FO is a foot orthosis. An SMO is a supramalleolar orthosis, so it's covering the ankle joint. An AFO is an ankle foot orthosis. So it sort of just goes on up the chain. A KFO, you get it, and that covers the knee. So when we talk about different types of bracing, I love these prefabricated carbon AFOs. They're very lightweight, they're very strong and dynamic, so you get motion. This is what I wear. I wear these simply because of those exact features. We've come a long way with bracing, and the manufacturing that goes behind these carbon braces is really complicated. And when these prefabricated devices are made, they're made by layering hundreds of layers of carbon in all sorts of different weave patterns. And then they're put under intense heat and pressure, and you get a device that has really good dynamic properties. And dynamic properties meaning they flex, they bounce, and they help with that push-off. So you can see that on this top picture, there's a foot orthotic, a foot orthosis that goes on top of that AFO, the prefabricated, and that foot orthotic positions the foot correctly, and you combine that with the carbon. If we need to have more control on what the foot orthosis can do, you can see this other picture where she's wearing an SMO combined with a prefabricated AFO. These devices provide ground reaction forces. And what's significant to that is so if I'm standing here and if I don't have the strength to stabilize my body and I don't know exactly where my body is, then I can almost use the device to give me feedback. So right now I'm leaning forward, I'm leaning into my brace. And that's giving me the balance and the stability to be able to stand here. You know, look, no hands. So that is, I think, what's fantastic with these ground reaction types of devices. And there's all different types, all different strengths that we need, all based on your activity level, your weight. All of these things play into it. So we talk about the prefabricated ones. These are custom made. So each of these devices you might have heard about. On the right, that's the fat brace. On the left here, this is from Kinetic Research. You know, these companies are improving a huge amount, and most of the time, these are not made by your local orthotist, because the tooling and the challenge to properly lay these in the lab, it's better outsourced. So there are these companies that really have come forward and have built these fantastic devices. You know, I say they're fantastic. You know, each one of us are going to be better to use one or the other, and that's where you have to figure that out with your orthotist. You know, talk about your goals and such. The fat brace, I find, is just far too rigid of a device for me. You know, yes, you know, you just saw me take a couple steps backwards. I bet you if I was wearing that set, that wouldn't have happened. But on a day-to-day basis, I would far rather underbrace myself and let my muscles work, let me work myself, and be okay with the odd stumble here and there than being overbraced. And but if you're quite active, or if you need to have a lot more stability than what I do, then those are ideal. You know, I had this set made, and they've been the only set of devices that I can stand and close my eyes, because I have feedback from it, and they're strong enough to hold my body. So I could stand minutes with my eyes closed wearing those. And you know, that was pretty darn cool. So I think that if I spent a lot of time in settings where I needed to just stand and talk to people in a crowded room or whatever, those probably would be ideal for me to wear. But I avoid those situations. So we always talk about aligning the body. So these are some great images. You can really see how far she's torqued out. And some of these carbon braces just can't do it. They don't cover enough of the body to really straighten out the body. And that's where these plastic systems are still great. And we can put straps, dynamic strapping inside the devices to pull and to try to torque the body. You can see 3 straps there. Those 3 straps are really used to help de-rotate that foot and ankle. That strap across the bottom of the ankle, that's harnessed on the inside of the plastic. And then it goes across the top of the foot and then to the outside of the plastic. So that has an effect to move that joint, instead of it just being harnessed on the outside of each edge of the plastic. And that's significant to how you get these straps to actually work for you within these AFOs and devices. Here's some other nice pictures.